Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends! Welcome back to our rProRevenge series, where you'll hear stories about people getting what they deserve. In this episode, we have 6 rProRevenge stories. The first story features someone getting clever revenge on a person who keeps using their driveway. The second story involves exposing a greedy individual, leading the IRS to step in. Ouch! The third story is a short story about exposing a fake doctor. Yikes! My friends, I hope you enjoy today's stories and hit that subscribe button for more in the future. Let's dive in. We don't own a car and live at the end of a cul-de-sac. People often use my driveway to turn around, which isn't a huge deal to me. It's a bit annoying when they compact the snow, making it harder to shovel, but I manage. However, one of my neighbors had a ride service pick up their child every day. The van would park in my spot and start honking at 8 in the morning. Half the time, the driver would be parked on my grass. I told my neighbor I don't mind my spot being used, but not if the driver is going to honk like that every morning, especially if he's driving over what little lawn I have. She spoke with him, but he ignored her. I spoke to him directly and got, "What's your problem, man? It's not like you're using it." I repeated that I don't mind him using it if he stays off my grass and stops honking every morning. Apparently suggesting he wait until the kid notices he's there or, heaven forbid, get out of the car to knock on the door was ridiculous and inhumane to him. So, I left a recycle bin at the foot of my driveway. He ran over it. I called the dispatcher for the ride service and was told they're subcontractors, technically self-employed, but they'd pass along the message. The next day, I woke up to pounding on my door. The driver was furious, saying, "How dare you call my boss, you idiot? What's wrong with you?" I explained calmly, "It's simple. You were told not to use my driveway if you were going to drive over my lawn and wake me up every morning. Now get off my doorstep." He threatened, "I'll sue you if I lose my job because of you." I told him he'd been warned not to trespass on my driveway or property again. He stormed off, shouting profanities. This happened on a Thursday. The kids had a professional development day the next day, and it was one of those delightful Canadian weekends where it drops to minus 40 degrees Celsius. For my American friends, minus 40 is where Celsius and Fahrenheit meet. It's freezing cold. That night, I grabbed one of my more beat-up plastic garbage bins, plugged all the holes with a generous amount of duct tape, and stuck a sign on it that read, "Private property, driveway not for public use." Then, I filled it to the brim with water. Before anyone thinks I'm a jerk who'd endanger other kids in the car, I'd like to point out that my neighbor's child is the first to be picked up, so it's just the driver in the car. Come Monday morning, the driver saw the garbage can, backed up a bit, and defiantly charged at it as if to teach me a lesson. The result? He caused some pretty serious damage to the front end of his car. He got out, fuming, called the cops, and came pounding on my door, screaming that I was going to buy him a new car and that I'd be arrested. The cop arrived and said, "Let me make sure I understand. He asked you not to park here if you couldn't stop honking, then warned you not to park here and put up a barrier. Now you expect him to be charged and pay for damages you caused to your vehicle while trying to destroy his personal property?" I'll never forget the look on the driver's face when the officer said, "Yeah, that's not how this works." The officer turned to me, asking if I wanted to pursue charges for him damaging my property. I gave him the biggest smile I could muster and said, "Nah, I think we're good." I went back inside to enjoy a morning coffee, watching from my kitchen window as he paced back and forth in the cold, waiting for a tow truck and calling his company to explain why they needed to send another driver to complete his route. Friends, these are my favorite revenges, the ones where people act maliciously, and it backfires, damaging their own property. This reminds me of a story I read long ago where a guy in a truck kept running over someone's mailbox, so they cemented it into the ground. That was a good one too. Next story. This happened about 5 years ago. My grandma was getting old. She was in her late 80s or early 90s. Her one wish was to not die in a senior home. This was easily manageable, as my grandpa had sold some assets years ago, invested the money, and let it grow for 30 years. When my grandpa passed away about 10 years before this, my grandma appointed my dad, my aunt, and my uncle as trustees of her trust, essentially her trusted advisors for her care and finances moving forward. All was well at first. Then my dad moved farther away and couldn't handle the day-to-day upkeep or check on my grandma regularly. My aunt Rebecca suggested that my uncle Fred, who lived in Arizona, could take over and everything would be fine. It was fine for a while. But when my dad visited, he noticed things weren't right. My grandma didn't always have overnight care, her mail wasn't picked up, and her driveway wasn't plowed. She'd lost her cable TV and newspaper subscriptions. My dad assumed they'd lapsed, so he reinstated them. He also noticed she was eating moldy food at times because her truck had been sold, leaving her without transportation. She mostly stayed home alone, doing crossword puzzles. The craziest part? My Aunt Rebecca lived just 2 miles away but only visited my grandma once a week on Saturdays for about an hour. When my grandma passed away, she got her wish and died in her own home. But upon her death, things got interesting. The probate lawyer gathered her children, my dad, my aunt, my uncle, and another estranged Aunt Becky, around the table. Some shady business came to light. Aunt Rebecca suggested everyone skip audits or paperwork, sell the house for around $400,000, and divide the remaining bank account balance, also roughly $400,000. Each sibling would get a check for $200,000, not a bad inheritance. My dad thought this was rushed. He noted that my grandma's house was easily worth $600,000 based on its size and location. Aunt Rebecca exploded, cursing him and calling him names for refusing to sign the assets over immediately. She wanted a quick close while everyone looked the other way. My dad left the room after the shouting, and the deal wasn't signed that day. It took nearly 6 months for another appointment. When you're a trustee and the person dies, the funds and financial accounts are under heavy scrutiny until all beneficiaries are informed and sign the final papers. At the next meeting, my dad had no intention of signing. He and my Uncle Fred agreed to audit the entire account going back 5 years. Aunt Rebecca argued that a forensic audit would cost $5,000 and was a waste, but since 2 beneficiaries requested it, it happened. The audit report arrived about 3 months later, and here's where things get good. My dad reviewed it and found it full of holes, like excessive monthly food costs for a 90-year-old woman. There were payments for car services for a car my grandma no longer had, and many other discrepancies. My dad asked me to take a second look, so I spent a Saturday night reviewing it. Here's what I found. Monthly food costs ranged from $1,100 to $2,000 for the last 4 years. Telephone bills for 6 cell phones when my grandma only had a home phone, gasoline for a truck she hadn't owned in 4 years costing about $400 a month, house repairs paid to my aunt's husband's construction business, including $16,000 for a new roof, new garage doors, and a home security system she didn't have, payments for my aunt's 2 European vacations, a stipend of $2,000 a month to my estranged Aunt Becky for 5 years, and $2,500 a month to her deadbeat son. Additionally, all the grandkids were supposed to receive a lump sum of $10,000 on their 30th birthday. Guess who got paid? Aunt Rebecca's kids and Aunt Becky's kids, but not me or my siblings. My grandma also gave loans totaling $200,000 over 3 years to Aunt Rebecca for her husband's construction business in exchange for equity, which amounted to nothing, especially after the housing bust. They also sold her assets, like jewelry, for cash, as some big-ticket items vanished from her house. Armed with this, the next probate meeting was eventful. In the interim, Aunt Rebecca's construction business filed for bankruptcy, so the $200,000 in equity my grandma had vanished. The probate lawyer was concerned, pointing out this was fraud and a breach of fiduciary duty, which could lead to prison time. After this, negotiations were much more favorable. Aunt Rebecca and Aunt Becky got nothing. 0. My other aunt received only $25,000 after her stipend payments. My dad and uncle shared the rest after all the grandkids received their $10,000 payouts. The house sold for the first offer of $520,000. That was the regular revenge for anyone who mistreated my grandma and left her eating moldy food. But here's the pro part. Aunt Rebecca probably felt bad she couldn't supplement her lifestyle with my grandma's money anymore, but that was the least of her worries. Since she tried to cheat me out of $10,000, I took it personally. Nobody wants to deal with the IRS. It's the scariest thing that can happen to your finances. I did some research, found IRS Form 30,949A, photocopied my documents, had them notarized, and sent the information to the IRS. About 18 months later, I was called to the IRS building in my city for an appointment. The agent reviewed the details, shared what they found, and asked for a sworn statement. It turns out my aunt didn't declare about $1.2 million in additional income over 5 years. She owed the IRS around $420,000, plus penalties. With her husband's bankrupt business and her teacher's pension, there was no way she could pay it back. Her house and vehicles were sold, and they moved to a depressing desert town in the southwest. About 3 months after the appointment, the IRS paid me $60,000. She should have paid that $10,000. Let me get this straight. I got paid $60,000 to hold my aunt accountable. I'd say that's a win. She was a terrible person and deserved everything that came her way. Next story. My neighbor, who we'll call Christy, would report us to our HOA for literally everything she didn't like. Trash cans still on the street at 5 in the evening on trash day. Reported kids. Bikes outside while they're playing. Reported not mowing the lawn over the weekend. Reported by Monday morning dog barking at 2 in the afternoon as she and her dog walked on the path behind our house. Reported. In many cases these weren't even HOA violations, but due to her repeated reports the board fined us. I had to spend evenings at 2-hour meetings to get them removed. This kept happening and was driving me nuts. Both my wife and I spoke to Christy to understand why she felt this was okay. She told us, "You just need to do a better job being good neighbors." Fast forward to early this summer, she posted on a neighborhood website, sharing a video about the anti-vax movement. The replies were aggressive, calling her out, but she pushed back, leading to a long post about how we were all wrong and should listen to her because she's a doctor. She signed it Dr. Christy, last name, naturopathic physician. I wondered why any doctor would be against vaccines. It didn't make sense. So I started digging. I found Christy listed as a doctor on physician directories. I researched what a naturopathic physician is and learned that in my state of Colorado, they're regulated and required to maintain a license. I checked the state database and found 2 things. 1, Christy wasn't listed as a naturopathic physician. 2, the regulatory board has an online reporting tool. I gathered my information, took screenshots, checked my timeline, and reported her for claiming to be a naturopathic physician without a license. This is a hot-button issue for me, especially since she signed her post as doctor, last name. I think doctors of osteopathic medicine are wonderful for integrating holistic health with well-researched medical practices. Naturopathy, less so, which is the problem here. One research article, nearly 13 years old but still relevant, explains valid concerns about naturopathy. I checked Colorado's regulations again and couldn't find any Christy last name listed. Searching her first name or zip code in my town or nearby provided no results. There were 2 naturopathic doctors in a nearby town, but her name wasn't among them. At this point, Christy locked the post and later deleted it entirely. I was thrilled she removed it, but today it got better. I received a copy of the cease and desist letter Christy got from the state about a month ago. It ordered her to stop practicing immediately. And that, my friends, brings us to the end of another pro-revenge story. Next story? I divorced my ex-wife over 5 years ago because she repeatedly cheated on me with more than 13 different men and 2 women. To give you some background, my ex and I were swingers until the final year of our marriage. Things had spiraled out of control, so I decided I was done with swapping partners. Unfortunately, she didn't agree and continued hooking up with men behind my back. 6 months before our divorce, my oldest child was diagnosed with a life-threatening illness. I won't go into details to protect my anonymity. My wife began to crack under pressure and started drinking heavily, putting herself and our children in danger. It got so bad that I moved out of the house for a couple of weeks and took our kids with me. During this time, her best friend, whom we'll call Amy, approached me. My ex had confessed all her reckless behavior to Amy during a girls' night out. A couple of days prior, she admitted to sleeping with a new man every night and getting drunk, even when she had the kids. She also told Amy that one night about a month ago she left our 3-year-old and 4-year-old children home alone while they slept, so she could meet a guy. Amy revealed that my ex planned to file for divorce after draining more money from me while living rent-free in my home. Both Amy and I were disgusted and knew this had to end. My ex hated living in the same house as me because she despised me and couldn't freely pursue her string of desperate partners. We devised a plan to get her out of the house and document her poor behavior to limit her custody of our children. Step 1. I moved back into the house and plopped down on the bed right next to her. She lost her mind, demanding I leave and threatening to call the police. What she didn't know was that I was recording our conversation. I told her to get lost and she called the cops, falsely reporting me for domestic violence. The police arrived quickly and had me in handcuffs so fast it made my head spin. A detective came to the squad car to talk to me, and I let him listen to the recording. The longer he listened, the angrier he became with my wife. Before long, she was the one in cuffs, spending the night in jail. She went to stay with Amy for the next week, as I obtained a restraining order that barred her from returning to our house. During this time, she went on a spending spree, buying herself a new laptop, a new iPhone, and a new wardrobe. She drained our bank account and started dipping into my savings. Amy confirmed that she was drinking heavily at her house, to the point of vomiting and soiling herself in the bathroom. Amy recorded 20 minutes of video showing my ex completely out of control. The next day, I withdrew all the money from our savings and deposited it into a new bank account to cover the bills. When my ex found out she had no more money to spend, she lost it. She told Amy she was contemplating ending her life because things had gotten so bad. I didn't like my ex, but I didn't want her to harm herself. Amy convinced her to seek help and accompanied her to check into a mental health facility. This worked out perfectly because it showed she was a danger to herself and the kids. I consulted my attorney to start divorce proceedings and complete the necessary paperwork. My attorney was appalled by my ex's actions and was fully committed to helping me gain primary custody. He filed the divorce decree and secured a temporary restraining order until our initial hearing. We served her the papers while she was in the hospital and set the hearing for 2 weeks later. At the initial hearing, she appeared with her attorney. Since it was a pre-litigation hearing, they didn't know what evidence we had. She took the stand and lied profusely, claiming I was abusive and that's why she ended up in a mental hospital. She put on an award-worthy performance. Then it was my turn. My attorney presented all the evidence, videos, bank records, and more. The defining moment came when Amy testified, detailing how neglectful my ex was and how her substance abuse issues were worsening. My ex was stunned, her mouth agape, as Amy exposed her lies, making her attorney look foolish. When the dust settled, I was awarded sole custody, and she received supervised visitation until she completed rehab and additional treatment. We quickly settled out of court, agreeing to a graduated visitation schedule once she complied with rehab and mental health counseling. I kept the house after paying her portion of the equity, retained all my investment accounts, and got to see my kids 80% of the time. She lived with her mom for the next 2.5 years, jumping from job to job. Life is pretty good 5 years later, and it's even better knowing she's no longer my problem. Amy was definitely the MVP in this situation. Without her testimony against her best friend, the outcome might have been very different. Imagine going to court and having your best friend testify against you. What a shock! Next story. I used to work at the post office as a rural carrier associate, a part-time driver job that paid well. I wanted a full-time job with benefits, so I started there. The full-time driver on my route was Bill, a guy who did whatever he wanted, and the postmaster allowed it. When I was trained, I rode with Bill for 1 day. The next day, he called out, leaving me to sort the mail and drive the route alone. It was awful. The postmaster should have made him come in, but he was spineless. I didn't finish until around 8 o'clock in the evening, when it should have been around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, given the time of year and how long the route typically took. My schedule was every Saturday, and any vacation days Bill took, I also covered whenever he called out. This was supposed to be a 1-day-a-week job, as I had a full-time job at my local hospital. The post office was in the next county, about a 45-minute drive each way. I'd get calls from Bill at 6 o'clock in the morning with the same flimsy excuse for not coming to work. He'd claim he had to see an orthodontist that day. I worked with doctors and knew there was no way he could get an appointment that early. If he needed one, he should have called me the day before so I could arrange coverage for my other job. The spineless postmaster let it slide without consequences. On my anniversary, I told Bill I was taking my wife out for a nice lunch before her hospital shift. At 6 o'clock in the morning, he called with the same excuse and I had to go in. I reminded him it was my anniversary, but he said too bad. I went in extremely upset. The same thing happened on my birthday and my wife's birthday. He called out and I had to work both jobs. A few months later, nothing had changed. I applied to nursing school and was accepted for the fall program. I kept it to myself, planning to continue working. If offered a full-time post office job, I'd take it. If not, I'd go to nursing school. Both were great career paths. Bill called out whenever the workload was heavy, like when Sears catalogs arrived. They were the worst. Bill had recently gotten remarried and hadn't taken a honeymoon, so they scheduled a 2-week Caribbean trip. He told me a month in advance, which was plenty of notice, and emphasized that the tickets were non-refundable, saying, "Don't mess this up." I'd had enough of Bill and the postmaster constantly taking advantage of me. 10 days before his trip, I submitted my 2-week notice. The postmaster assumed I'd work through Bill's vacation, but I only covered the first 4 days. Bill called me at home, saying, "Man, I've been good to you. You've got to cover my time off. The vacation is non-refundable." I reminded him of all the times he lied to make me cover, including my anniversary, my birthday, my wife's birthday, and how he made my first weeks miserable during orientation. I left on the day I said I would. The postmaster refused to cover, so Bill had to cancel his trip and work. I love nursing and made the best choice. What a great pro-revenge story. Playing the long game is so satisfying, causing him to work during his honeymoon and lose the money he paid for the trip. Well done, my friend. Next story. When I was in 8th grade, I tried out for the drill team, the group that dances alongside the marching band, separate from the cheerleaders. Think of the Rockettes, but more awkward. I tried out because the popular pretty girls, teachers' favorites, laughed at me during the informational meeting, saying I wasn't right for it and didn't belong. Their words made me more determined to learn the routines and get fit enough to perform them. I was as flexible as a 14-year-old could be, but I practiced and stretched at home and attended rehearsals and tryouts. Only a couple of decent girls didn't treat me like I was toxic when we had to link arms. I passed tryouts because I mastered the routine. My dad, who owned a car repair business, wasn't rich but managed to pay for my camp fees and uniforms. He dropped me off each morning of summer camp on his way to work. We learned routines for pep rallies and football games, standing in the sweltering Louisiana heat and humidity in August, holding positions for minutes at a time. Any mistake meant doing kicks, a version of push-ups, or running laps, with 25 high kicks per infraction. I ended up with blisters on my upper arms from the sun. The team sponsor, a teacher, was the epitome of a cranky older woman. Her only child, who had been on dance teams and took private lessons, was perfect in her eyes. This was before dance moms, but that's exactly what she was like. She berated me for the smallest things and encouraged the other girls to bully me. For example, when I felt faint after doing kicks for the 3rd time in a day, I sat next to another girl who had pulled a hamstring. The sponsor, watching her daughter, the team's choreographer, praised her while telling me to get back out there. She said she understood why the other girl was sitting because she was an athlete, but I didn't get a pass. She'd yell across the gym for me to suck in my stomach, and the other girls would join in. Junior high was tough enough, and this made it worse. I tried to stay strong, but I'd cry as soon as I got home. On the night of our first game performance, I waited to be picked up with a few others. The sponsor went to the bathroom and returned with a girl caught smoking with high school kids. Her punishment was sitting out the next game. My dad was running late because he couldn't leave his shop unattended. After about 30 minutes, the sponsor told me, "You know this means you're off the team." My dad arrived a few minutes later and I sobbed as soon as I got in his truck. I told him what happened, and he said, "Just a minute, I'll be right back." He confronted the sponsor about her attitude toward me. Years later, that same sponsor brought her car to my dad's shop for repairs. He remembered her, but she didn't recognize him. She was as condescending as ever, treating him like a lowly servant because he did manual labor. While writing her insurance estimate, she tried to get him to include damage unrelated to the accident, like a ding on the back bumper when the damage was in the front. He refused, and she got huffy, threatening to have his license revoked. After his shop had been broken into and his tools stolen, my dad had installed cameras. He sent the video to the insurance adjuster, and she was charged with attempting insurance fraud. I don't know the full extent of the consequences, but she's lucky her threats to his livelihood weren't added to the charges. I wonder what the penalty for auto insurance fraud is. Let me know if you have the answer. These stories are a masterclass in karma, catching up with entitled behavior. Here's my take on each. The driveway saga is peak petty revenge, and I'm here for it. The driver's arrogance, honking at 8 a.m. and ruining the lawn, deserved a response. I love how the OP escalated from a recycle bin to a water-filled duct-taped garbage can in minus 40 degrees Celsius. The driver's decision to ram it and wreck his van is poetic justice. The cop's reaction, shutting down his complaints, made me grin. This reminds me of a similar story where a cemented mailbox stopped a reckless driver. Classic. The grandma's trust story is infuriating yet satisfying. I'm appalled at Aunt Rebecca's neglect, letting her mom eat moldy food while siphoning funds. The audit revealing her fraud, fake car services, vacations, and favoritism felt like a gut punch to her greed. The IRS payout of $60,000 for reporting her $1.2 million in undeclared income? Brilliant. I'm glad the op and their dad got justice for their grandma's mistreatment. Christie's HOA snitching drove me nuts. Reporting bikes and barking dogs is petty, but claiming to be a naturopathic physician without a license? That's dangerous. I'm thrilled the OP's research led to a cease and desist letter. It's a reminder that false credentials can't hide from scrutiny. The ex-wife's story is heartbreaking but triumphant. Her cheating and neglect, especially leaving kids alone, is unforgivable. I admire Amy's courage in testifying against her friend. The recordings and evidence securing sole custody for the OP was a win for the kids' safety. Bill's post office antics made my blood boil. Calling out on special days like anniversaries shows zero respect. I cheered when the op quit during Bill's non-refundable honeymoon. Perfect timing. The drill team sponsor's cruelty to a 14-year-old is sickening. Bullying and favoring her daughter was bad enough, but kicking the op off for her dad's delay? Awful. I love that her insurance fraud attempt backfired at the op's dad's shop. Cameras don't lie. That wraps up this episode of ProRevenge. If you missed the last episode, check it out if you haven't, and I'll see you in the next one. I love you all.